After getting drunk at my good friend's house, I was led into a room by his sister. She whispered softly, coaxing me, "Be good and give it to me." Unexpectedly, although my good friend's sister was young, her skills were remarkable. That night, we released our love through indulgence, finishing an entire box of strawberry-flavored treats. I was also tortured beyond belief. When I sobered up, Liu Ryan swore to take responsibility for me. Later, we became the beloved couple on campus, envied by everyone. My good friend was thrilled, always asking me when I would officially become his brother-in-law. Liu Ryan looked at me like a treasure, her eyes full of deep affection as she said, "This year, but just before the wedding." I went to the movies with my good friend. As we passed a small alley, we ran into a group of ruthless thugs. They had fierce, menacing faces, blocking our way and not letting us leave. In the end, my good friend fought them off with all his might, allowing me to escape. But when I ran as fast as I could to the police station and called the police, from that day on, Liu Ryan only had hatred left for me. The Liu family refused to forgive me, breaking off our engagement and forbidding me from paying my respects to my good friend. I hated myself, wishing that I had been the one to die that day. But now, all I could do was atone for my sins. I became Liu Ryan's assistant, working day and night to help her with all sorts of dirty and tiring tasks. To help her secure business deals, I drank myself to the point of gastric bleeding. Several times, I barely clung to life. Again, I suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. When I went to the hospital for a checkup, I discovered that I was already in the late stages of stomach cancer. A wave of panic flashed through my mind. Terrified, I went to find Liu Ryan. When I tried to hold her for comfort, just like before, a deep male voice resonated from inside the car. "I hate that assistant of yours. When will you finally get rid of him?" Liu Ryan hesitated for a moment. Then in a cold voice, she said, "Don't worry. We're getting married soon. He won't affect us. Besides, he was the one who killed my brother. I can only wish for his death." Hearing this, I felt as if my heart was bleeding. I turned around, got into my car, and drove back to the hospital. There, I sought out the doctor. "I don't want treatment anymore," I said. "I am willing to donate all of my organs." The doctor was stunned. He tried to persuade me. "Are you sure? If you undergo treatment actively, you can still prolong your life. But if you give up, you'll have less than a few months left." I let out a bitter smile. "I'm sure. I should have died a long time ago. This way, I can finally go and personally apologize to Liu Chang's. And Liu Ryan, she will finally be freed of me." From that day onward, I pretended as if nothing had changed. Every day, I still went to work as usual. Liu Ryan still made me drink. Night after night, I drank endlessly. Drank until my face turned deathly pale. Yet I endured it all. Only when the gathering ended did I rush to the restroom, vomiting blood in great mouthfuls. This time, I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I found myself. I was lying on my bed at home. My bloodstained clothes had already been changed. Someone was sitting by my bedside. It was Shen Youchu. She was my college classmate. All these years, she had always liked me. But because of Liu Ryan's presence, she never dared to confess her feelings. She could only silently take care of me from afar. At this moment, she held the crumpled medical report in her trembling hands. Word by word, she read it over and over again. Shen Youchu was a doctor. Naturally, she knew what those results meant. Her eyes reddened. Her voice trembled as she asked, "You have stomach cancer?" I woke up from the abyss. Slowly, I regained my composure. Taking a deep breath, I wiped the tears from my face and nodded. Shen Youchu suddenly stood up. "And you still dared to drink? It's Liu Ryan, isn't it? She forced you again, didn't she?" I lowered my gaze and remained silent. But Shen Youchu already knew the answer. Her heart twisted in pain. She immediately grabbed my hand. "You can't go on like this. You need to leave her right now. You have to get treatment at the hospital. But I withdrew my hand, forced a weak smile. It's not that serious. Don't worry. I'll take care of myself. Do you even realize this is cancer? I don't want to be hospitalized. Youchu, let me make my own decision. Seeing the determination in my eyes, Shen Youchu knew she couldn't change my mind. She also knew that Liu Cheng's death 5 years ago was a wound in my heart that would never heal. She didn't argue anymore. Instead, she stayed the whole night to take care of me. And the next morning, she only returned to the hospital in the morning, and I quietly went to work as usual. Today, I had to accompany Liu Ryan to a banquet, but I wasn't her date. I was merely following as her assistant. Bodo was her real companion for the evening. When he saw me, his face was filled with disdain. He Kong, I truly admire you. Even now, you still have the shamelessness to stick around Ryan? Bodo was our high school classmate. He had liked Liu Ryan since we were young. But he lost to someone like me, someone with nothing. He had always been jealous of me. Now that he was Liu Ryan's fiancé, he could finally torment me without restraint. I didn't refute anything. I simply stood quietly on the side. At that moment, Liu Ryan approached. Bodo intimately linked his arm with hers. Liu Ryan didn't resist, but when her gaze met mine, her eyes turned a shade colder. Who let you into the banquet hall? Go wait outside. Beijing had already entered winter. There was no heating outside, only the chilling wind howling through the night. I simply nodded. All right. I turned and walked out of the banquet hall. Outside was an open-air garden, not a single tile to shield from the cold. I stood there in the freezing wind, my frail and thin body shivering uncontrollably. A waiter, unable to bear the sight, asked if I wanted to rest in the lounge. I silently shook my head. And so I stood there until nightfall, until the banquet ended. Bodo walked out, draping Liu Ryan's coat over her shoulders. Both of them saw me still standing there. Liu Ryan's throat moved slightly. Her voice inexplicably turned hoarse. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and leave. She took Bodo's hand and walked away. I followed behind them. As we passed by the artificial lake in the garden, Bodo curled his lips into a smirk. He quickened his pace by a few steps, then suddenly stumbled as if someone had pushed him. Oh no! My bracelet fell into the lake. He turned around angrily, glaring at me. Who told you to push me? Instinctively, I defended myself. I didn't. You're still denying it? Bodo clung to Liu Ryan, pouting like a spoiled child. Ryan, that was my favorite bracelet. Liu Ryan's gaze fell on me. She stared for an indeterminate number of seconds. Then she spoke in a low voice. Go down and get it. She didn't even ask, just immediately pronounced me guilty. I glanced at the lake. Even at a single look, the water exuded bone-chilling cold. But I remained silent and stepped in. The water wasn't deep, reaching just above my knees. But in the dead of winter, every step felt like treading on blades of ice. I was already weak. The longer I searched, the more my body began to sway violently. Liu Ryan only watched for a few seconds. Then she turned her back, leaving behind only a single sentence. If you can't find it, don't bother coming in tomorrow. After that, she left with Bodo. I stood alone in the freezing lake, an indescribable sorrow welling up in my heart. Bending down, I searched all night. Finally, I found the bracelet. At dawn, I trembled as I tried to stand up. By then, my entire body had already turned stiff and frozen purple, but I couldn't care about any of that. Clutching the bracelet tightly, I rushed back to Liu Corporation's building. Bodo was in Liu Ryan's office. He took the bracelet from my hands, but after just a glance, he frowned in disgust. It's covered in mud. It's dirty. I don't want it anymore. With that, he yanked the bracelet apart and tossed it into the trash. Liu Ryan merely cast a fleeting glance at it. Then in an indifferent tone, she said, "If you don't like it, then just throw it away. I'll buy you a new one." Boda beamed. "You're the best." Covered in filth and soaked to the bone, I walked out. The employees at the executive office barely spared me a glance. This was nothing new to them. Over the years, they had seen me suffer countless humiliations. Yet none of them could understand why I still held on. I had never taken a single day off. I merely swallowed to flu prevention pills and followed Liu Ryan on another business inspection. By the time it ended, dusk had already fallen. Boda came to pick Liu Ryan up for dinner. "Hey Kong, why don't you join us?" He sounded so warm and inviting. But it wasn't until the dishes were served that I realized why he had asked me to come. The entire table was filled with spicy dishes, and for dessert, there was lychee ice cream. But I was allergic to lychee. Before even the slightest trace of chili in my food would have Liu Ryan carefully picking it out for me. But now, she seemed to have long forgotten. She didn't spare me a single glance. The entire time, she was pouring water for Boda, picking food for him. Boda turned to me, pretending to be curious. "Hey Kong, why aren't you eating?" Liu Ryan finally lifted her gaze and looked at me. A trace of coldness flickered across her brows. "If you're not going to eat, why are you even here?" I had no choice but to pick up my chopsticks. I took a piece of spicy chicken and put it into my mouth. After I finished eating, Liu Ryan left with Boda. I returned alone. My forehead was drenched in sweat from the spice, my stomach twisting in unbearable pain. I lay on the bed motionless. No matter how much it hurt, my eyes were too dry to shed even a single tear. All the suffering I endured over the years was my way of atoning for Liu Cheng's death. The more pain I felt, the lighter the crushing weight on my shoulders seemed to be. As my mind blurred from the agony, the corners of my lips curled into a silent, lonely smile. A few more days passed, because I hadn't undergone any treatment. With the constant drinking eating away at my stomach, my condition worsened rapidly. Yet each time, I would just take a couple of painkillers to get by. That day was a weekend. I lay on the sofa, hurting so much that I didn't dare to move. Just then, my phone rang. It was Liu Ryan. Boda wants to eat Shen Youchu's wontons. Go buy a serving for him. As Liu Ryan's assistant, I never had a day off. But today, I was in so much pain that I couldn't even get up. Can Assistant John go instead? Before I could even finish my sentence, Liu Ryan's voice turned ice cold. "Hey Kong, did I ever give you a choice?" I sucked in a breath, unable to say another word. "Either you go or never show up again." After saying that, she hung up the phone without hesitation. I had no choice but to endure the pain and get up. Stumbling, I made my way out the door. Shen Youchu's wonton shop was located in a remote alleyway. Yet it was incredibly popular. I waited in line for a full 3 hours before I finally got a serving. But by the time I dragged myself to Liu Ryan's place and handed her the wontons, Boda's expression instantly darkened. "Who told you to add chili?" I was in so much pain that even breathing was difficult. "But don't you like spicy food?" Boda suddenly overturned the bowl, spilling the wontons. "I don't like spicy food anymore." Liu Ryan stared at me, her gaze heavy. "Go buy it again." I had no choice but to drag my aching body back out. The second time I brought it back, Boda complained that it had shrimp in it. Liu Ryan acted as if she couldn't see that he was deliberately making things difficult for me. She simply spoke in an indifferent tone. "Go buy it again." And so, I ran back and forth multiple times. By the last trip, it was already dark outside. Holding the freshly wrapped wontons in my hands, I weakly made my way back. A sharp pain tore through my stomach. My steps felt unsteady, my head clouded with dizziness. I wasn't even paying attention to the road ahead. Then suddenly, the sharp screech of tires pierced my ears. A van sped toward me. Before I could react, it slammed into me with full force. My body was thrown to the ground, rolling several times. The impact was unbearable. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood. My vision turned to static. Everything blurred into a swirl of white. Am I finally going to die? Can I finally see Chang's again? A single tear of relief slipped from the corner of my eye. Then I completely lost consciousness. Hospital. Shen Youchu saw the stretcher being pushed out of the ambulance. When she realized it was me, her eyes trembled violently. He Kong. She called out several times, but I remained motionless on the hospital bed. Yet I continued to cough up blood. Even the chief doctor was stunned. Could his internal organs be ruptured? Shen Youchu's face turned pale as she spoke urgently. He has stomach cancer. The doctor's expression changed instantly. He rushed to have me wheeled into the emergency operating room. Hours later, the surgery ended. They had only managed to stop the bleeding from my external injuries. Every medical monitor in the room was showing that my vitals were dropping. Shen Youchu panicked. Professor, what's happening to him? The professor shook his head. Late-stage stomach cancer. His body was already extremely weak. The accident accelerated his organ failure. On the hospital bed, I didn't wake up. I only coughed up blood endlessly, while unconsciously muttering a single name. Ryan. It looked like I wouldn't last another second. Shen Youchu, eyes bloodshot, grabbed my hand tightly. Her voice choked with emotion. Kong. Hold on. Please, just hold on a little longer. I'll call her. I'll bring her to see you. Just wait for me. With that, her trembling fingers reached for her phone. She dialed Liu Ryan's number. The call connected. A cold, indifferent voice came through the receiver. He Kong. I told you to buy wontons. Did you get lost on the way back? Shen Youchu clenched her fists. It's me, Shen Youchu. The person on the other end fell silent. A few seconds passed before she finally spoke in a low voice. Why are you holding his phone? Her voice trembled. Word by word, she asked, come to the hospital. See He Kong for the last time. Silence again. No one knew how long it lasted. Then Liu Ryan let out a cold laugh. Shen Youchu. Did he tell you to play along with his act? Shen Youchu wished she could strangle Liu Ryan. Her voice cracked as she shouted, He Kong, he! But before she could finish, a weak hand grabbed her wrist. She lowered her head and saw that I, who had been unconscious just moments ago, had somehow woken up. I struggled to shake my head, silently mouthing the words, Don't let her come. At that moment, on the monitor screen, my heart rate began to rise slowly but steadily. From the other end of the phone, Liu Ryan's hoarse voice carried through. What happened to him? But Shen Youchu no longer had time to answer. Watching the heart rate continue to climb, she was overwhelmed with joy. She hung up immediately and ran to get the professor. After another round of examinations, the doctor removed his mask, wiping the sweat from his brow as he let out a relieved sigh. His vitals have stabilized. Quick, move him to the observation room. And so, they wheeled me into observation. Meanwhile, after being abruptly hung up on, Liu Ryan stared at her phone for a long time. Jiboda noticed her dazed expression because of me again, his eyes flashing with jealousy and resentment. Ryan, they're obviously working together to deceive you. They just want your attention, that's all. After all these years, He Kong still hasn't had enough of these tricks? As he spoke, he reached out to hold Liu Ryan's hand, but missed when she suddenly stood up. Liu Ryan spoke calmly. I still have work to finish. You should go home first. Jiboda had thought that tonight, finally, he would be allowed to stay. Upon hearing this, he could only storm out in frustration. Study room. Liu Ryan stared at her computer screen, yet all she felt was unease, unable to focus no matter how hard she tried. She dialed another assistant's number. Find out where He Kong is right now. She could hear the tremor in her own voice. The assistant responded affirmatively. A dozen minutes later, the assistant called back. President Liu, assistant, he was in a car accident a few hours ago. He's currently at Ming'an Hospital, but he's out of danger now. Liu Ryan gripped her phone tightly. She didn't say a word for a long time, so long that the assistant couldn't help but ask, "Would you like to go see him?" Liu Ryan was silent for a while. Then she simply said, "Don't let him know I asked." The assistant hesitated briefly, then agreed. The call ended. Liu Ryan said nothing more. Yet that night, the light in her study room remained on until dawn. The next day, hospital. I was feeling slightly better. Shen Youchu had stayed by my side the entire time. She looked at me as if she was pleading. "Akong, you really can't delay this any longer. You need to be hospitalized immediately and start chemotherapy. If not, you won't last much longer." But I only smiled and shook my head. "That's great. I've been waiting for that day." Shen Youchu froze completely. A deep, stabbing pain surged through her heart. Her voice trembled. "Must you punish yourself like this? This isn't punishment for me. Youchu, thank you for staying by my side all these years. If you truly care about me, then let me make my own decision. Consider it my final request. 5 years ago, my soul had already died completely, and now, it's finally my body's turn." The next day, I disregarded Shen Youchu's protests, insisting on being discharged from the hospital because it was the anniversary of Liu Chang's death. Holding a bouquet of chrysanthemums, I arrived at the cemetery. I stood before the tombstone, gazing at the black and white photo of him. He was so young, so handsome, so kind. Yet his life had forever ended on that day. "Shungs, you probably don't want to see me, do you? All these years, I've dreamed of you every single night. Every night I tell you I'm sorry. I wish I could go back to that day. If I could, I swear I wouldn't have run away." I sat down, leaning against the tombstone, just like we used to when sharing our little secrets. "I'll be able to see you soon, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid you won't want to see me. I'm afraid that you hate me too." As I spoke, tears slid silently down my cheeks. Cold winds howled through the cemetery. I traced my fingers over his photograph, a deep, unspeakable pain swelling in my heart. In a hoarse voice, I whispered, "Whether you hate me or not, I will come find you. We promised to be brothers for life." I stayed at the cemetery for a long time. Just as I was about to leave, I saw a group of people approaching from the other side. My steps froze in place. Among them, Liu Ryan's eyes met mine instantly. This was the first time we had seen each other since my accident. I noticed the flowers in front of Liu Chang's grave. Her expression darkened immediately, and in the very next second, Liu's mother caught sight of me. She rushed over, shaking with fury. Then, without warning, she slapped me across the face. "Who allowed you to come here? Get out!" The force of the slap made my vision blur with stars. I staggered back a step. "Auntie, I just wanted to." "Shut up!" Liu's mother roared. "You have no right to come see him. Chang's died because of you. Get out of my sight." My left cheek swelled rapidly. I endured the pain, too afraid to say another word. Liu's father quickly held her back, trying to calm her down. "Kong, just go! Don't come back here again." But Liu's mother wasn't satisfied. Her gaze landed on the bouquet of flowers. Breaking free from Liu's father's grasp, she snatched up the flowers and hurled them at me. Her cries were heartbreaking. "We don't need your fake sympathy. If you hadn't run that day, if you had stayed and helped him, how could Shangs have died so horribly?" She hated me with all her being, even though everyone knew. Even if I hadn't run that day, the outcome would have been the same. We both would have died together. But Liu Chang's death was too tragic. It blinded everyone with hatred. They resented me for not letting Liu Chang's leave first that day. Liu's mother sobbed as she continued to curse at me. And in the end, she shoved me hard. "Why was it Chang's who died? Why aren't you dead yet? I stumbled backward from the force of the push. My head slammed into another tombstone. Blood instantly spread across my forehead. Liu Ryan's fingers clenched tightly. As I staggered to my feet, barely standing, she suddenly grabbed my arm with force. Don't get too emotional in front of Chunks. I'll make him leave right now. With that, she dragged me out of the cemetery, outside the cemetery gates. She shoved me away roughly. Her eyes were pitch black with rage. Through gritted teeth, she hissed, "Are you trying to die? I warned you. Never come back here again." Gaze burned with fury, but there was something else mixed within it. I parted my lips bitterly. I just wanted to see Chang's. Liu Ryan's voice turned chillingly cold. "You don't deserve to." And with that, she turned sharply and strode back into the cemetery. She ordered the bodyguards to drive me away. Those words, "you don't deserve to," stabbed into my heart like a blade. Staggering, I walked away. Tears streamed down my face as I wandered the streets aimlessly. But in my ears, Liu Cheng's bright, cheerful voice echoed, "Akong, this bracelet too have one, I have one. We're brothers for life. You better not think about leaving me behind." Akong, yesterday I saw my sister looking at engagement rings. She's really going to marry you, huh? Once she's your wife, she be in charge of you. It'll be even harder for me to ask you out. How about we go watch a movie tonight? Akong, run now! Tears had long streamed down my face. Shengs, do you know how much I regret not standing in front of you that day? Not making you leave first? If I had died instead, then no one would have suffered. A man without parents dies and is simply forgotten. If I had died in that moment, maybe Liu Ryan would have loved me forever. Maybe we wouldn't have ended up like this. The more I thought about it, the more it hurt. And finally, I couldn't hold on any longer. My emotions burst like a dam breaking. I crouched on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The next day, I took a leave from work and went to a temple. Near Beijing, there was a temple said to be incredibly spiritual, Puchuo Temple. Over the years, I had visited Puchuo Temple countless times. Every time, I knelt for hours before the Buddha, praying for Liu Cheng's peaceful afterlife, praying for Liu Ryan's health and safety. But after today, I might not have another chance to return. This time, I knelt beneath the Bodhi tree at Puchuo Temple. Legend said, if one proved their sincerity, they could ask the temple for a rare treasure. That night, snow suddenly began to fall. The wind and frost lashed against my body. I was so cold that dizziness overtook me. Pain surged through every part of my body. It hurt so much that despite the freezing night, a thin layer of sweat beaded across my forehead. I shivered uncontrollably, and then, with a muffled choke, I spat out a mouthful of blood. Yet, I still did not rise. I had knelt there for an entire day and night. At dawn, a figure approached me. Only then did I notice the patch of blood in the snow. Amitabha, you have shown such sincerity, sir. What is it that you seek? My face was deathly pale. I wobbled as I struggled to stand. Pressing my palms together, I bowed slightly. I wish to request a pair of everlasting candles and a peace talisman. Everlasting candles. It was said that if they were lit before a deceased person's tablet, they could bless them with a lifetime of peace in their next life. Once I had received the items, I immediately made my way weak and trembling back to the company. This was the last thing I could give them before I left. The only thing left within my power. But I knew Liu Ryan would never accept anything from me. So I waited until noon when no one was around, and quietly placed the everlasting candles on her desk. As for the peace talisman, I planned to sneak it into her car when I got the chance. After going downstairs, I didn't leave. I wanted to see if Liu Ryan would take the candles with her. So I waited outside the company building, watching for her to get off work. At 6:30 p.m., Liu Ryan finally walked out. In her hand was the bag containing my everlasting candles. My eyes lit up with hope. Then I saw her hand the bag to her assistant. She pointed in a direction, the trash disposal area. I immediately followed after the assistant. Sure enough, I watched as he headed toward the garbage site. Panic surged within me. Just as he was about to throw the candles away, I rushed forward. "Don't throw them away!" I snatched the bag from his hands. But when I looked inside, it was empty, and then a cold, piercing voice came from behind me. "I knew it was you." My mind went blank. Slowly, I turned around. The everlasting candles were still in her hands. The assistant had already left. Liu Ryan stepped toward me, holding the candles. Her voice was as icy as a blade. "You think this can repay Chang's? You think doing something this foolish will clear your debt?" I just wanted to give her one last thing. I didn't explain. Instead, my voice trembled as I spoke. But Liu Ryan didn't hesitate. She snapped the everlasting candles in half. "I don't want them." I lunged forward, trying to stop her, but I could only watch as they broke into two pieces. She tossed them into the trash. In the motion, something else slipped from my pocket unnoticed. Liu Ryan's sharp eyes caught it midair. A peace talisman. I clenched my hands tightly. Then I heard her voice, cold and dripping with sarcasm. "Always talking about atonement. Yet you ask for a peace talisman for yourself? He Kong. You really are the same coward you've always been afraid of death." She let out a chilling laugh. Then she tossed the talisman aside. It landed directly in a puddle of dirty water. "You think you deserve peace? You should spend your whole life suffering." Leaving those words behind, Liu Ryan turned and walked away without looking back, leaving me standing there alone, staring blankly at the gifts I had painstakingly sought, now wasted, just like my life. After everything, it was nothing but a meaningless dream. I bent down, picking up the soaked talisman she hadn't seen. Inside, hidden within the talisman, was a small slip of paper I had placed there. "May Liu Ryan be safe and sound. May her life be filled with joy and peace." But the ink had already bled from the water, making the words impossible to read. A metallic taste surged up my throat. Tears welled in my eyes as I forcibly swallowed it back down. 3 days later, I returned to work. The injuries from the accident had mostly healed, but my stomach cancer had worsened. That very night, Liu Ryan took me to another drinking event. Everyone around the table pressured me to drink, and as always, I drank without hesitation. Assistant, he really can hold his liquor. Respect, respect. The burning sensation in my stomach was unbearable. Amidst the noisy chatter, Liu Ryan simply watched me drink silently, coldly. Like always, I drank until the very end. From start to finish, I never stopped. As the gathering wrapped up, I quietly slipped away to the restroom, taking to pills to numb the pain. I forced myself to endure it and returned to the private room, only to find that everyone had already left. Liu Ryan had long since gone. I was used to it. I assumed she had abandoned me yet again. Without a word, I walked outside, intending to catch a ride home. As I stepped out of the club, the cold wind cut through me. The headlights of passing cars blurred before my eyes. Everything was hazy, indistinct. Drunkenness clouded my vision. Knowingly, I wandered toward the middle of the road, raising a hand to hail a cab, but my movements were sluggish. The next moment, a car came speeding toward me. Just before impact, a hand suddenly yanked me back to the sidewalk. A wave of warmth washed over me. I looked up and met Liu Ryan's dark, stormy gaze. "You trying to get yourself killed again?" I stared at her, utterly dazed. My mind suddenly went blank, as if frozen in place. We were standing so close, almost pressed against each other. And then a memory resurfaced, one from many years ago. Several school clubs had gathered for a beach party. I had never seen the sea before. Excited, I ran towards the shoreline, picking up seashells. But in my carelessness, I was bitten by a crab hiding in the sand. I nearly lost my balance. Liu Ryan instinctively reached out and pulled me into her embrace. Our lips met, colliding due to the sudden force. And then she kissed me harder, more insistently. The more we kissed, the heavier our breaths became. Everyone else was busy admiring the sea. No one noticed. No one saw the aloof school belle pressing me down, kissing me recklessly. The ocean breeze, the bonfire, the laughter of friends, the fading glow of youth, amid the lively crowd. Unspoken affections were indulged to the fullest. It turns out, that had been one of the most beautiful moments of my life. I wondered if Liu Ryan was recalling it too. She didn't let go for a long time. But then, a furious voice cut through the air from behind. Jiboda had come to pick up Liu Ryan. And he saw everything. "What are you two doing?" Liu Ryan finally snapped out of her trance. She pushed me away. A fleeting, unreadable expression crossed her face. She said nothing. She simply turned around and walked toward Jiboda. "It's nothing. Let's go." Jiboda shot me a dark, heavy look. Then, without another word, he took Liu Ryan's hand and led her away. I stood there, still frozen in place, as if intoxicated. Or perhaps still lost in the memories, until Shen Youchu came looking for me. She finally managed to drag my drunken, dazed self away. Late at night, I had just arrived home. A message popped up on my phone. Old classmate from Beijing had sent an invitation. "This Saturday, let's all gather at Nightfall Bar." In the long list of tagged names, I saw mine. And I saw you Ryan's. Our names. Now, they would only appear together like this. The group chat came alive with excitement. Everyone responded enthusiastically, as if we were back in those days right after graduation, when none of us wanted to say goodbye. On Saturday, I went to the reunion. I wanted to see these people one last time. To give my youth a proper farewell. But what I didn't expect was that Liu Ryan would come too. She had never liked these social gatherings. Back then, it was always Liu Cheng's and I who dragged her along. But today, not only did she show up, she even brought Jiboda with her. The night buzzed with drinking, singing, and laughter. Before long, someone suggested a game. "Come on, spin the bottle." Liu Ryan stepped out to take a work call, missing this round. I wasn't particularly good at these games, but they pulled me in anyway. The bottle spun. And when it stopped, it pointed at me. The dare on the card read, "Kiss the next person who walks in for 10 minutes. I held the slip of paper. Silent. Jiboda smirked, full of amusement. "He Kong, I know you're all pure and righteous. If you really can't handle it, then just kneel down and polish my shoes, and I'll let the dare slide." I looked at his mocking expression and clenched my fists tighter. A man on the verge of death. What did it matter who I kissed? So I spoke calmly. "I choose the dare." Jiboda wasn't surprised. Instead, his smile deepened, a glint of amusement flashing in his eyes. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Liu Ryan finished her call and turned around, only to see a heavily made-up older woman excitedly walking toward the private room. She was still on her phone, boasting to a friend, "I just landed a big deal. Somebody paid for me to kiss a handsome guy." Her voice dripped with satisfaction. She hung up just as she reached the door, licking her lips in a grotesque smirk. She reached out to push the door open. Just as she was about to step inside, a strong grip stopped her in her tracks. "Excuse me." Liu Ryan's cold voice cut through the air. Without another word, she stepped past the woman and entered the room first. The moment everyone saw who had walked in, the room fell into stunned silence. Jiboda's face darkened instantly. How could this happen? I too stared at Liu Ryan in surprise. Yet she remained utterly composed, her voice indifferent. "What's everyone staring at?" Someone hesitated before answering. "He drew a dare. He has to kiss the next person who walks in for 10 minutes. Liu Ryan sat down calmly, clearly not intending to go along with it. "Boring." Jiboda quickly chimed in. Yeah, let's just skip this one." Everyone knew Liu Ryan was engaged, so they swiftly brushed past the awkward moment. The reunion came to an end. In a secluded corner, Ji Boder cursed at the older woman. Didn't I tell you to get in there quickly? The woman looked innocent. It's not my fault. That woman forcefully dragged me away. I swear, she did it on purpose. The thought that Liu Ryan had actually protected me made Ji Boda's face turn even darker. Their families had been engaged for 2 years, yet she never once mentioned marriage. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. After sending the woman away, he made a call. The next day, Liu Ryan was summoned home by her parents. Do you need something from me? Her mother looked at her, displeased. I have a question for you. When exactly are you planning to marry Ji Boder? You've been engaged for so long. Even Ji Boder is complaining now. The Ji family wants you two to get married as soon as possible. Liu Ryan's expression remained unchanged. The company is busy right now. That's just an excuse. Her mother snapped. Don't think I don't know the real reason. You refused to marry Ji Boder because you still can't forget He Kong. Liu Ryan's hand, holding the teacup, froze. Her face instantly turned cold. Seeing her reaction, her mother knew she had guessed correctly. Her anger deepened. You and He Kong are impossible. With that, she dragged Liu Ryan to stand before Liu Cheng's memorial tablet. Are you really going to marry the man responsible for your brother's death? I know He Kong wasn't the one who killed Cheng's, but he was the reason it happened. Cheng's died protecting him. If he hadn't run away that day, if he hadn't, Cheng's wouldn't have died so horribly. Just maybe there would have been a chance to save him. Even the slimmest chance. But our family, we can never get past this. No matter what, he will never step into our house. Not unless I die first. Liu Ryan's mother sobbed as she cursed, and then, collapsing against Liu Cheng's memorial tablet, she wept uncontrollably. Liu Ryan looked at the youthful, innocent face in the photo, at her mother drowning in grief, and she felt something heavy pressing against her chest, suffocating her. Finally, her hoarse voice broke the silence. She spoke the words she had long known to be true. I will never marry He Kong. But that wasn't enough. Her mother's voice rang out again. Then do this for your brother's sake. Marry Ji Boder. Liu Ryan was silent. 1 second. 2. 3. And at last, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. I will marry Ji Boder. At dawn, Liu Ryan still stood by her bedroom window. In her hand, she held an old diamond ring. The ring I had given her. The one from the day I proposed. Back then, we had been so close, so painfully close to getting married. And now, she gazed at the ring, silent, for a long time. And then, finally, she closed her eyes. With a flick of her wrist, the ring vanished into the depths of the night. 3 days later, I had just returned from the hospital, and downstairs I saw a car, leaning against it. Was Liu Ryan as if waiting for me. I quickly hid the medication in my bag. Then I walked toward her. Are you looking for me? Liu Ryan lifted her gaze to meet mine. She suddenly noticed I had lost a lot of weight. My complexion was pale, almost sickly. Her throat moved slightly, as if hesitating to speak. But in the end, she said nothing. She simply reached into her pocket and took out an envelope. I lowered my head. The moment I saw it, the blood in my veins turned to ice. I remained frozen in place until her voice, calm and distant, drifted above me. Ji Boder and I are getting married. I just wanted to let you know. Don't come. And don't congratulate me. A dull pain spread through my chest. So she hated me this much. So much that she never wanted to see me again. With trembling hands, I took the invitation, but I couldn't bring myself to lift my head. I didn't want her to see my face. Instead, I only nodded in silence. Wish you happiness. Liu Ryan and Ji Boda's wedding was set for a week later. I submitted my resignation to the company. It was quickly approved. She was getting married. She didn't want to see me anymore. Even atoning no longer held meaning. 3 days before her wedding, I took stock of my savings over the years. After working at Liu Corporation for so long, I had managed to save a decent amount. I sold my apartment and donated every last cent to the Hope Project. 2 days before her wedding, I visited the cemetery. I purchased a burial plot right beside Liu Cheng's. Then I spoke to the staff. When the time comes, don't put a name on my tombstone. There won't be anyone visiting my grave anyway. This way, if the Liu family ever sees it, they won't know it's me, and they won't be angry. The day before her wedding, I began settling my affairs. I called a junk removal service, had them take away everything that belonged to me. And in the end, the house, now empty and silent, held only a single cardboard box. Inside were Liu Ryan's and my high school student IDs, the movie stubs from our first date, a photograph of us together, the necklace she once gave me, letters we had written to each other. I lit a fire in a small metal basin. One by one, I fed the memories to the flames. Memories I had revisited countless nights. I sat in the barren house until the next morning. The sun had begun to rise. Today was Liu Ryan's wedding day. I staggered to my feet, and suddenly I noticed a pool of red on the floor. I raised a trembling hand to my lips. Only then did I realize I was coughing up blood, but I didn't care. Unsteadily, I walked outside. It was a rare sunny day, yet my whole body shivered with cold. I walked, blood trailing behind me. Passers-by gawked in horror, but I never once stopped. At last, I came to a bridge. Beneath it, the river stretched deep and endless. How frigid the waters must be. I sat on the edge of the bridge, dialed the hospital. Hello! I will die today. Please arrange to collect my body and proceed with organ donation immediately. After I hung up, I stared numbly at the river. Blood streaked my face. Yet I smiled. At last, it was all coming to an end. Today, she was newly married. I slumbered at the bottom of the river. This was the best ending I could ever think of. With a smile, I closed my eyes. Resolutely, I took the final leap. Never again. Liu Ryan. Half an hour later, at the wedding venue, Boda stood on the stage in his suit, awaiting Liu Ryan, who walked toward him in her wedding gown. Yet, Liu Ryan's mind was far away. Her head was filled with my voice. Kyung, what kind of wedding do you want? The wedding I want is simple. I want a vast green lawn, adorned with countless colorful balloons, inviting only our dearest friends, and letting Cheng's be our best man. But a Liu family wedding could never be simple. Liu Ryan, who said I was going to marry you? At the time, neither of us could have foreseen that in the end, I truly wouldn't be able to marry her. Her vision was filled with my silhouette. She moved through the ceremony mechanically until the moment came to exchange rings. An assistant suddenly approached in urgency. Miss Liu, your phone has been ringing nonstop. Liu Ryan frowned. Do you even know what occasion this is? The assistant looked troubled, but it has been ringing for a long time. I'm afraid it might be something urgent. So, she still reached out for her phone. An unfamiliar number displayed on the screen. She swiped to answer. A furious roar erupted through the line. It was Shen Youchu's voice. Liu Ryan's expression turned ice cold in an instant. Shen Youchu, you better have a good reason. But the voice on the other end spoke only one sentence. And in the next moment, Liu Ryan's face turned deathly pale. With a loud thud, her phone slipped from her grasp and hit the floor. In the very next second, before everyone's eyes, the bride suddenly went mad. She bolted out of the venue, sprinting like a lunatic.